important is this cell phones? Can I please have you reach into your pocket, your purse, your bag, whatever you're carrying that holds your dinging, blinging, ringing thing, and switch it off. We all know the person who doesn't recognise their own ringtone. So we want to make sure that we're all disconnected for the next hour and a half. So before I introduce today's seminar, I also want to make you aware that at the end of today's programme, we are offering a tour of a couple of the available homes here on our campus. Obviously, many of you are residents, you're already here and living in your beautiful homes, but for those who are visiting the campus today and who may or may not be researching their retirement communities, you would be very welcome to join us on that tour. You can just meet me at the back of the room and we will work on that at the end of the programme. So today's lecture is Bhutan, the Land of Thunder Dragons. Presenter Claude Shappelle is a very popular figure around both of our campuses. While he lives here at Heritage Village, he presents programmes both here and at Moravian Hall Square. In addition to seminars on his world travels, Claude is an exceptional musician and vocalist. We are extremely fortunate that he chooses to share his talents to educate and entertain his fellow residents here at Morning Star Living. Today, Claude is taking us along with him on his 2009 journey through Bhutan, the fabled land of the Thunder Dragon. His 17-day motorcycle adventure crossed a remote Himalayan kingdom known for its dramatic beauty, spiritual depth, and strict limits on tourism. Travelling solo with a guide, a tour leader, and a mechanic — you can't go without a mechanic when you're riding a motorcycle in the mountains — Claude experienced Bhutan in few ways that visitors ever do. An unforgettable ride through one of the world's most culturally preserved nations. Before we get started, I want to give you a little heads up. Today's presentation includes a few images of body parts that may be surprising to those unfamiliar with the Bhutanese culture. In Bhutan, these images are not considered inappropriate. They're actually an important part of the country's artistic and cultural heritage. They're used symbolically and are deeply rooted in Bhutan's history and spiritual practices. I share this simply so that you know what to expect as we explore this fascinating culture together. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in warm welcome for Claude Shappelle.
Thank you for your kind remarks, Liz. That was very nice. Before I start, I would like to thank Linda McKeek in the back room. She's showed up over here with me several times to find out how my zip drive worked in this machine here. So I really appreciate her help. And well, thank you for coming. I appreciate your attendance. And if you're like me, you like to travel and perhaps you like to take pictures, but you never look at those pictures of your travel, right? I appreciate the opportunity to do this because I get to relive my experience, okay? Has anybody in this crew ever been to Bhutan? No. There's a fellow there that in 9th grade did a large report on Bhutan. And if you have any comments, anybody, any questions, I would ask you to please raise your hand and let's get involved, okay? So before we begin, oh, I thought I turned this on. Well, Linda's the tech, so, well, maybe I turned it off. Ah, I turned it off, Linda. Thank you. Well, it was a 2009 trip, and we spent the first 4 days in India, and we went into Bhutan and came out again and spent another 2 days in India. The 4 days in India were because I extended the trip by 3 days. I find India fascinating. And the last time I was here, we did a presentation on India. You know, the culture, the colors, the people, it's just a wonderful thing. And so if you'll allow me, I'd like to show first some pictures, a very few pictures of my time in India on this trip, okay? We flew from New York to New Delhi, India. It was a 14-hour flight. I think I had 3 meals. I watched Ben-Hur and Lawrence of Arabia, according to my journal. Non-stop. So here we go with some pictures of India. Indira Gandhi International Airport. And then we hit the traffic, and if you can see, there's motorcycles and vans and cars and buses and rickshaws and just all kinds of traffic. And they're very good drivers. I remember on the India trip, I fell down. I hit too much of the right brake on my motorcycle, and it just fell on the ground. And all these people went around me, no problem whatsoever. I stood up, very embarrassed, and got back on the bike and continued. But they're very good drivers. This is my 4-star hotel. Very nice. Nice bathroom. And there are a lot of non-India people there, all dressed up in saris. And I think it was some kind of a wedding, but a destination wedding, perhaps, for someone who's marrying an Indian. This was the biggest Muslim mosque in India, in Delhi. And look at the traffic. Snake charmers on the sidewalk. And they respond not to the music, but to the vibrations of that flute. And I did some research on cobras. And I thought perhaps they were defanged, but they aren't. If you defang a cobra, it dies. So what they do is that they bring them out in public often, and they become accustomed to people. That doesn't frighten them. And they feed them well, so they're not as apt to strike if they're well fed. And you remember in the India presentation, they think that cows are sacred. And once cows have lost their usefulness, they no longer give milk, for example, they just release them into the environment, and you may not kill them. So we're in the city. I didn't see any cows in the city, but we saw that. And I was surprised by this person. I like taking pictures of people. He's selling meat on the street. He's bathing on the street. He's getting his hair cut on the street. And they love to have their picture taken, even in Bhutan. You don't have to ask permission. They pose. And the small streets, you look up, and you just can't believe. I think people probably just splice in and get free cable or something like that. And open sewers. No signs, beware of the pile of junk or anything. It's just, so that's it. That's India. And perhaps it'll give you some contrast for when we get to Bhutan. But we're going now, we fly into Delhi, and we need to fly on a domestic airline very close to Bhutan. Not to Bhutan, but to another city in India. And it's called Kampong. I guess I ought to talk about motorcycle trips for those of you who aren't familiar with them. It's like a bus trip. You know, instead of getting a seat on the bus, you get a motorcycle. And on some trips, you get to pick the motorcycle. But, you know, they get 650 cc's or 1,000 cc's or whatever. On this trip, you were just given a British motorcycle. They provide, you know, make arrangements for all the hotels, and they provide most of the meals. The most important thing on a motorcycle trip is insurance. Because if you're off in the middle of nowhere on a motorcycle and you have an accident, you know, likely there's no hospital or help nearby. So the guide of the motorcycle trip usually has a satellite phone that he can use to call a helicopter. So you pay for helicopter rescue, and it's very expensive. It's, you know, 20, 30% the cost of the trip, but it's well worth it. Fortunately, I never had to use that. Why go to Bhutan? I know people have asked. I have a friend, I traveled with Patrick, and he was a 20-year resident of Asia, and he would sponsor tours, and I toured with him to China, along the Great Wall of China, to Mongolia, and to India. And he said to me, you know, you might be interested in the Bhutan trip. I said, sure, so I signed up. And I was very expecting him to be the tour leader because he was very expert in leading tours. But he developed prostate cancer and wasn't able to go. So basically, well, where is Bhutan? You're probably familiar with it. There it is, that little speck. It's the size of the state of Maryland, a little larger than the state of Maryland. And it has 800,000 people who live there. Less than 1 million people live in Bhutan. And it's nestled in the Himalaya mountains. Better picture, it's the red area, and it's between India and China. And India and China have a very good relationship with Bhutan. India has a very good relationship with Bhutan because when India achieved independence in 1947, Bhutan was the first country to accept that. And India claims that any aggression towards Bhutan is aggression towards India because they remember when Tibet was annexed by China. And India does not want Bhutan indexed by China. It wants Bhutan on its border, not China. Strict entry policy, oh my gosh. In addition to the cost of your visa and your trip, they tack on $200 a night tax for your visit. And they demand, it's mandatory that you take a Bhutanese guide who stays with you 100% of the time. The purpose is to limit tourism because they want to maintain their culture and their religion. They want quality, not quantity. They don't want backpackers. So it's really something. The first year they allowed people to enter their country as tourists was 1974. That's 50 years ago. But only 298 people came in 1974. Last year, 2025, there were 2,009 tourists that visited Bhutan. But that's only about the number of people who visit the Grand Canyon in 15 days. So they purposefully limit tourists. So, secluded, independent nations long thrived on isolation to preserve its cultural and spiritual heritage. It was a private tour. Let me explain that a little bit. There were 4 paying customers who were supposed to go on the trip. Myself and 3 British motorcyclists. But at the last minute, those 3 British motorcyclists canceled. So I guess, Patrick had to make a decision, but because I had traveled with him 3 times, and I think I'm a pretty low maintenance kind of guy, he ran the trip for me. So it was a private trip. But you wouldn't believe it, not just me, there were a crew of 4 that accompanied me. We had a tour, and Liz talked about this. Thank you, Liz. There was a tour director who was a fellow that I'd been on 3 trips before. He was really Patrick's second-hand man. He was very helpful on all these other trips. His name was Alan. Well, we had a Jeep driver. You have to follow the motorcycles with a vehicle that can hold extra parts. There has to be a driver for that. And the mechanic for the motorcyclists also travels in that van. And then in addition, we've got that Bhutanese guide. So there were 4 guys for me. So I could concentrate on the ride, the mountains and the monasteries and just the curvy roads and not have to worry about anything else. Alan was the fellow who was our tour leader, and I have toured with him 3 times before. He has a small motorcycle shop in Delhi. He owns 20 motorcycles like we drove, which are British Royal Enfields, and he owns the Follow van. He's an entrepreneur in Delhi. Hassan was our driver. Bhupendra was our mechanic, and Bim was the Bhutanese guide. Bim lives in Thimphu, where we're going to stop. The altitude there is 7,400 feet above sea level, and he lives in an apartment. In the winter, it's very cold, but he doesn't heat his apartment because he can't afford it. And he eats with his fingers, but he's very charming. And he struggles with English, although he's supposed to be the guide. So I really miss Patrick, because he would explain, early in the morning at breakfast or at the end of the day over a beer, he would tell us what we saw, and he was very knowledgeable. Alan, he had the respect of the 3 fellows in the crew, but he really didn't explain too much about what we were seeing. And Bim really struggled with English, so I had to learn things by the description of the tour, and afterwards looking on AI or Google or something. But they're British motorcycles, 500 cc's. The thing about them is that everything is the opposite. On American, your accelerator is here, and then your accelerator is here. On America, the brake's here, and the shift's over here. So on that bike, you push your foot down to brake, and it downshifts. So you really got to get used to that, but in Britain, everything's the opposite. So in this trip, we ride on the left-hand side of the road. That's the bike. They sound really good. They're based on 1940 specifications, and the parts are readily available because there are millions of them, but they're not nearly as good as Japanese bikes. So that particular bike overheated many times on our trip. Here we are. You waited for Bhutan. It's a happy and contented people. National identity and culture. It's the only carbon negative country in the world. 70% of Bhutan is covered by forests. There are no traffic lights in the whole country. It's the home to the Himalayan range. It's got very, very little crime, and it's a young democracy. It's a parliamentary democracy similar to Britain, with a king. So here we are, we're in that, I'm not gonna pronounce these names, okay? We're just gonna say the next place. So we're in India and we're about to enter Bhutan. Welcome to Bhutan. And we need to go through an antiseptic bath, the cars and the motorcycles. And people are shocked by the photo of Bhutan and the Indian border. India is to the right, Bhutan is to the left. This is Bhutan, the first look, once we pass through that antiseptic bath. The first roads were paved in 1974, and not all of the roads are paved. This place had a big prayer wheel, and they had prayer wheels of all sizes. And you spin them in a clockwise direction, and they're filled with sayings like on these flags. And as you turn the wheel, the sayings go through the air onto people, and they get the benefit. There's a national dress. For fellows, it's something like a kilt, knee-high. And for women, it's an ankle-length outfit. It's called a kira. And it's not only used on special days. You see people on the streets wearing them. Thought that was cute. Any questions? Don't be shy, please. Ask if you have a question. So now we're on to the second town, and I guess we can pronounce Pharaoh. Again, a non-paved road, lots of dust. And you see how that truck filled the road. They're very narrow. We're in the foothills of the Himalayas. The climate varies depending upon the height. I would say this trip it's spring, but at the top of the mountains, it would be like 40 degrees, and down at the bottom of the mountains, it might be 75, 80 degrees. So there'd be a big difference, and you're winding around those mountains and going up and down all the time, so the weather is changing. And the roads usually they don't have any guardrails. Land of the Thunder Dragons, the name is because the fierce Himalayan thunderstorms echo and roar through the mountains like a dragon. So that's where it gets their name. And again, you have to be very careful. Non-paved. And no sooner than we set out on the second city did the problem with my bike. And I said, they're not as reliable as Japanese bikes, so we had problems. But they set work and they fixed it right away. And we continue. And there was a jam. We said that they limit tourism. And the result of limiting tourism is that there are no crowds. There are no traffic on the roads. And the hotels are virtually empty. Can you imagine going on tour and having no crowds and empty hotels and no traffic on the roads? But here was a road jam. And so I took the opportunity to visit. Let me see if I can do this. This is a wonderful thing. When you shine up here, it's great, but when you put it on there, it just changes. So I visited one of these places, and no smoking. You can't smoke in Bhutan in public places. If you want to, it's legal, but if you want to smoke, it's got to be in your house or some private, not in a public place. And it was like a little grocery store, and these are the people that ran it. And I think they're the people that fixed me lunch. And typically the crew did not eat with me. They had a different schedule. In fact, sometimes they didn't even stay in the same place that I stayed. I think they found some place cheaper. And they played cards while I ate. This is my lunch. Looks like apples, a sandwich, and some eggs, and some tea. And there we go with the squat toilets. You're familiar with them, right? People in North America are blissfully unaware that the majority of people in the world don't have flush toilets and don't use tissues. They use what they call the hand and water technique. They squat down, they do their deed, and then there's always water, little cups available, and they clean themselves with the fingers of their left hand. And then they wash their hands and pull up their pants without drying themselves. I mean, if I were to squat, I don't know, could you get up again? And I just can't imagine handicapped people. Can you? I don't understand. It's the great YouTube video. If you want to look at YouTube and check up squat toilets, and there are two types of people. They were called wallers or doorers, meaning do you sit facing the wall or do you sit facing the door? It's a really funny video. But fortunately, I didn't have to use this kind of a thing. But it's very common. This is the only one I saw on the whole trip. And this is the way they relax. So they're accustomed to squatting. But could you get up? I don't know. There's a book called The Road Less Traveled. There's another book, a funny, humorous book called There's No Toilet Paper on the Road Less Traveled. And it says the best of travel humor and misdemeanor. I'd like to read that. And again, some of the roads, you can see there's no guardrails. But those are not winding around mountains. It's kind of straightforward. And they knew that I was an educator, so they stopped at a school. And I met the principal of the school. And I always carry pencils. I don't like to give young kids, candy. So I always take pencils. And so I gave him a bunch of pencils. And the little boy, I've seen kids not knowing what pencils are. And it looks like that to him, but I doubt that. But anyway, he was so charming. He introduced me to his family. And he showed me, you can see, the altitude is very high. This might be 7,000 feet. And the air is cool, and you can see her cheeks. So he walked me to his school. There were 63 students, 6 grades, and 4 teachers. And this was posted on the wall. The vision for the school to produce productive citizens. The mission was to impart wholesome education through physical and mental education, social education, and intellectual education. School development plan, plant trees, dig 2 disposal pits, plant flowers, repair broken glass and furniture, procurement of school furniture. This is our classroom. Blackboard, green board. Questions?
Girls and boys?
Pardon me?
Girls and boys.
Girls and boys, yes. And the education is in English, where you saw the charts. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We were all responding that everything was in English and we were
Yes.
trying to.
And their school is scheduled around a 13-year program. I'm not sure how much of that is mandatory, but 30% of the young kids in Bhutan don't have access to school. They live in remote farms and aren't able to go to school. Looks like their volleyball court. And the prayer flags, I put some up, they come in all different colors. And the different colors have to do with the message or the prayer on the flag. And the essence of the thing is that wind blows the flag and blows those prayers onto whoever needs to be nearby. So the more flags, the more prayers that you get. So I understand that the white flags have something to do with cleansing the sins of departed souls. But there are lots of them. But look at that little narrow road. And that's just a small bus. I didn't see a big tour bus on the whole trip. And that's one reason for stopping. There aren't tourist stops along the way. And I've been on trips with women motorcyclists, and they just grab their toilet paper and head off into the woods. You can see the road. It looks like there's some guardrails on that one. This is another monastery, probably. We didn't visit it because we would have had to cross that bridge on foot with lots of prayer flags. So you cross the bridge and you're wealthy with prayers. And they usually, they're welcome, happiness, good luck, safe trip. You can look at the prayers on the ones that I brought. And we passed the airport. And Pharaoh has what they consider to be an international airport. And why we didn't fly into the international airport from Delhi, I don't know. But it looked to be it's not too long, is it? But again, we had that local airline, so it would have been a small airport. So I don't know why we didn't fly here. And you can see they fly from Nepal, Thailand, Singapore, Bangladesh, India. And this is the Zong. Very common. We saw a lot of them. We never went into any of them. And they serve 3 purposes: the government, religious, and military. There are a lot of temples inside them. The monks live inside Zongs, and there are a lot of open spaces within them. They're beautiful, and there are lots of them. This is my hotel for the evening. Again, it's the spring. I was so tired at the end of the day after dinner and a drink or two, I would never watch TV. So I don't know if they had, I think they did have TV. Regular bathroom. BJ, you had a question?
No, I just,
Oh, okay. And And that's a yak, a stuffed yak. Very important animal to the Bhutanese people. But you can see I have padded clothing that I wear in case I fall or slip out on the dirt. And I saw my first archers. Are there any archers here? What? Good, Tom. Yeah, archery is the national sport in Bhutan. Every town has an archery range in it. They're cute kids. All well-dressed, well-behaved. That's my dinner. The food, you know, is rice and pork and potatoes and lots of vegetables and hot chilies and I don't know what that meat was. My pork maybe? I don't know. That looks like potatoes. Question? Oh, okay. And the next morning, I remember we passed school kids with their lunch boxes. And again, they were wearing the goes and the kiyas. Pat's nice homes. And this is what Liz was talking about. A lot of the homes and many of the buildings have penises on them. And the penises are supposed to bring good luck and to expel devils and to bring fertility. So the more penises you see, the more fertile you are. So you see a lot of penises. And I don't know whether I've got too many, but I'm showing several of them, so please don't be offended. And as I said, 70% of the country is covered in forests. And there's always animals of one sort or another on the roads. You have to be very careful. I missed a cow very narrowly. Because you're cruising along and you turn a corner. But, you know, you develop a way of riding the twisties. You look as far ahead as you can so that you're not surprised by anything that comes along. You don't look down at the road in front of you because you'd be surprised about animals on the road. You look as far ahead as you can. And you slow down at the curves until you can see the end of the curve. Then you can accelerate through it. But it's a skill, and you have to learn how to do it. But it works. I developed that, I think. I didn't know what that was. I took the picture. I had no idea. I looked it up, and it's called a takin. It's the national animal. They said it's similar to a goat. It's got this oily hair, and the hair and the oil keep it nice and warm in the winter in the high altitudes. I don't know if they eat it or why. I have to. It's called a takin. Ugly. And, you know, 80–90% of the people are Buddhists. And they believe in birth, rebirth, death, and karma. Birth, death, rebirth, and karma. And the force behind everything is karma. And karma is good or bad. What you put out comes back to you. If you have good karma, your rebirth is happy. If you have bad karma, your rebirth could be an animal. Humans can be reborn as animals. Animals can be reborn as humans. And so Bhutanese people are very kind to animals and to each other because they don't know how they're going to be reborn. And yeah. And this is a stupa. You see lots of them. And it's a religious relic. It's filled with religious things like medals and pictures and documents and ashes of monks. And so it's a religious site, and pilgrims approach it, and they circle it always in a clockwise direction. And they'll do that for hours, and they get the benefit of whatever is inside. They honor whatever is inside. This particular stupa had eyes. Eyes of the Buddha watching the world. We cannot hide from our karma. The first Buddha, Siddhartha, lived in the 6th into the 5th century BC, and he supposedly knew of his previous lives, which was what nobody else except that first Buddha said that he could do that. And people approach these religious places with what they call prostration, and they do it for miles. It's much more pious than bowing or kneeling at a religious site. They prostrate themselves. They lay down their hands, their face, their knees, their body is touching the ground. Then they get up and they walk 3 paces and do it again. And they do it for miles. Here we go. This is the most famous religious site in Bhutan. It's called the Tiger's Nest Monastery. The ground is 3,000 feet, and you climb up to it. It's nestled on the side of a cliff at 10,000 feet. So there's a 7,000 foot difference between the bottom of the monastery. It was built in 1692 for the second Buddha. The second Buddha actually meditated in a cave here for 3 months. And that's important because the second Buddha is the one who introduced Buddhism to the people in the country. So there it is. You can see the little white up here. And so myself and Hassan, the driver, and Bim, the Bhutanese guide, we decided to hike up to it. And at first it was a walk in the park. We loved it. And as we continued, we could buy a stick to help us, and we could buy stuff. And if you see here are prayer wheels. And prayer wheels come in all sizes. And if you take the top off of the prayer wheel, and if you could do this if you're interested in looking, there's a spool of documents in there. And so you always spin these, and I can spin it counterclockwise with no problem. But getting it clockwise is a little harder, but you gotta spin it clockwise. And you've gotta walk around the stupas clockwise. And then the little one is pretty neat also, that's clockwise. But this handheld, everybody as they're walking around the stupas or the religious sites, they're always spinning these things, and they do it for hours. So you're welcome to come up and try this afterwards if you're interested.
Claude,
Yeah. Question, oh boy.
what is the currency, or is there a barter system in Bhutan?
No, they have their own currency, and I have a picture of it somewhere in this presentation. But the Indian rupee is exactly the same value. And I had rupees, and I think a lot of people use rupees in Bhutan.
Thank you.
But you get 4,500 rupees to $1 or something, you think you got $20 million in your It's really, and I remember in Delhi, I got tired of walking for 3 days, and I booked a rickshaw. So I got in a rickshaw, and I told him where my hotel was, so he headed back to the hotel. And at the end, I couldn't understand what he wanted, so I started dealing off rupees. And at one point he says, no. So I dealt a few more and gave it to him. It turns out it was worth 40 cents. So here we are, part of the way up. We could have taken, I don't know if that's a horse or a donkey or what, but could have done that. We walked. Remember, this is about 7,400 feet above sea level. And you remember the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City? The athletes had to arrive 3 or 4 weeks early to acclimate themselves to the altitude. You know, you get headaches, you get lightheaded, and there's no oxygen in the air. So you're high and you're breathing. And even though it looks like a walk in the park, it becomes it's one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And then it gets a little steeper. And those two are ahead of me. Here we are. Can't see it, it's still up there somewhere. Lots of you know what. There it is. We're still not near there. And we passed some of these coming down. I don't know why there are no riders on them. And if you look, there are little ceramic stupas on those rocks. And inside those stupas are ashes of people who want to be near this sacred site, this most famous monastery in Bhutan. I think I took this with my telephoto lens on my iPhone. Now we're level with it. And, we're quite happy because we thought we'd just walk over to it. No. You have to go down 700 steps and down 700 steps, which is pretty tricky, across a bridge, up 700 steps. And we passed the cave where the second Buddha meditated for 3 months. And that was the reason this monastery is there. And as I say, the monastery was built in 1691. And that, there's another just from across the way. We signed in up there. Unfortunately, they didn't permit photos, and we weren't able to go into the monastery. All this hike, and we just signed a book. So anyway, we celebrated, and then we got down. It was a 2.5 mile round trip thing. It took 4 hours. And it was very tiring, so we celebrated down here. I think the two guys who hiked with me rode into this, and I took my bike. But look at his shoes. It was very dusty. It was a very difficult thing, but it was worthwhile because it's so important. Continuing a trip, if you're riding, you come across a truck, you gotta be very careful. And many of the homes have roofs that are apart from the building. Reason being, agriculture is the second main reason for, aside from forestry. But what they did is they store their agricultural products up there, and it was ventilated, so the products didn't mold the way they might if you just put them in the basement or something. But that's a typical home. And here's some yaks. And I said they're very important. The hair. They make clothing and blankets, etc., from the hair. And they also use the dung, dry the dung and use it in their fires as lumber when lumber isn't readily available. They eat the meat rarely, at special occasions, but they give milk, and they use the milk to make yogurt and cheese, and I guess they drink it. They're beasts of burden as well. They can carry wood up through the mountains much better and go places that actually vehicles can't go. So they're very important. On to Thimphu. Thimphu is the capital of Bhutan. It's at 7,400 feet altitude. So it's very high. The air is very thin. Oxygen is not readily available. And in every town, there's a gateway that you pass through going into the town and leaving the town. And supposedly, it separates the sacred town from just everyday life. Here we go. The capital of Thimphu is the only capital city in the world without traffic lights. Human-centered approach. And there's a fellow in here. And I can't believe the traffic, because when we went, there was no traffic. And we said that was because of the strict immigration policy. And nobody here because there's no traffic. But some goes. This is my hotel. It's the worst hotel on the trip. There was no lobby, just a very thin mattress. And again, it's cold and there was no heat. But if you travel to underdeveloped countries, you should expect the beds not to be as soft as they are at home, the pillows not to be as soft, the food not to be as good. And you should expect the beds not to be the same, and not to be electricity more than like 4 hours a day. And no heat, but a little shopping center. There you go, the rupee and the Bhutanese money. Looms, maybe they were weaving yak thread. You could buy, go nuts, very inexpensive stuff. Prayer wheels along the road. This is a busy town, but it's warm. It must have been down low. And we visited a big stupa. And as I say, it was huge. It's a pilgrimage site. And you walk around it clockwise, spinning your wheel, so you get the benefit of the prayers coming off of your wheel and the benefit of everything inside the stupa. First monkey we saw. Neat bridge. And at the end of the bridge was a little fellow selling chai. Chai is a great black tea with cinnamon, sugar, other herbs, and maybe some honey. Delicious. And a glass of it is like 10 cents. Again, no room. This is a different house. But it lives subtropical, it's down low. That would be my meal. You can guess what that might be. That's certainly rice. They talk about red rice, but that's white rice. And veggies. And those are chilies. They consider chilies to be vegetables. And the onions, so very spicy. We stopped and the women were farming, protecting themselves from the heat. And they have, their kids with them. No babysitters. Alan was checking the map, I guess. Little schoolgirls. A 108 stupas to honor fallen soldiers that had died in a previous war. And you can walk around individually, or you could walk around the whole 108 of them and get the benefit of all those prayers. It was lovely, top of the mountain. This was a lunch stop. Above the door was another phallic symbol, wrapped up in a and this was our stop for the night. It was on a little agricultural road with a tractor. And here we are, a van and two motorcycles, and we had a royal welcome. I mean, as I said, the hotels were virtually empty. So when we arrived, it must have been quite a thing. We had hot towels, a wood fire. So it must have been cool, probably at a higher elevation. And after every day, we would usually have some adult beverages. And I had intimate conversations with him on many of them. He spoke very good English. He had an arranged marriage. His wife, or his parents did not like his girlfriend, so they arranged a marriage for him. At that point, in 2009, his wife was pregnant. And as I said, he owns 20 motorcycles, a follow van, and a small business that employs 3 fellows. He lives with his wife, his mother and father, his 2 brothers and 6 sisters. So that's 12 or 13 people living in the house. He's very interesting to speak. He's good English. Wangdu Province, Pradrang. More homes, and a lot of them had raised because they're farmers. And his first day it rained. We only had 1 day of rain in 17. And this is neat. That says toilet. And you always go around the mountain and you go over the summit. And it's a big deal. At the summit, there's usually a stupa and lots of prayer flags. And she was selling this. Again, The more you see, the more fertile you are. A good zong and around some homes. Another summit. Beautiful views. Unpaved, narrow roads. Past the school. And this is the way non-motorcycle tourists would visit Bhutan in a small van. So we had stopped and we talked with them. I was impressed by this home and all of the wood around it because that's how they heat their homes. And he usually rides in the van. He's our Bhutanese guide, but he hopped on the motorcycle for a picture. That's homemade. This is my home for the night and welcomed. You know, as I say, there are very few guests, so when one appears, oh. And he was 23 years old. He worked from 5 in the morning to 11 at night and got paid monthly. And he spoke very good English, which he learned in school. Lots of wood. And it looks like there's some looms over here. I just noticed them. The dining room and some more phallic symbols over there. And as I said, alcohol is legal except for dry Tuesdays. You couldn't drink anything on Tuesday. Beautiful views, you know, and the air is thin, beautiful if you're not hiking. Antamorngar. There you gotta weave in and out of them. The thing about this is that particular building had solar panels on the roof. Again, organized homes. No questions? Oh, we got questions. Oh, boy. What?
Here's the microphone. Hold on a second.
Pardon me?
Did you have somebody back there?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Oh, this stopped.
What's the major form of communication? Is there telephone or is there some kind of system?
I don't know about
Can you just repeat
telephones.
that question, Claude?
Excuse
Can we
me?
repeat the
She
question?
said, sure, what's the form of communication? Are there telephones? Gee, I don't know. I would imagine there'd be cell phones. You know, they got computers in 1999, so they're big on social media. They're on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Yes?
I'm still fascinated by the toilets.
By the what?
I'm sorry, by the toilets.
Yes.
And the sewage, you know, when I went to Bermuda and we had a guide, he asked me what I wanted to see. And I said I wanted to see what the sewage systems were like. Because you have a small country and you just wonder how it all works. Now, I noticed that some of the toilets were flush toilets and the others weren't. When you have the flush toilets, where does the stuff, the water go? And if you have the non-flush toilet, where does that go? I just don't understand how they can go. You had to drive through a sanitation pole to get there, and they have sewage in the street.
Good question. You know, I think that the hotels and public buildings have flush toilets, so they must arrange probably for sanitation, but the homes don't, and they just probably go into a pit, right? You know, and when I would sit with Alan at dinner or before dinner for a drink, he confirmed to me that no Indian uses a toilet or uses toilet paper. So how they dispose of sewage, I don't know. Anybody else? Okay, good, nice. Oh,
I want to ask you another question. Who monitors the no drinking on Tuesdays?
oh, I don't know.
Who's the monitor? I mean, what's the punishment if you drink on Tuesday?
Don't know.
They
Good.
just flip this out of their mind.
I don't.
Somebody said karma.
What was that, Linda?
Here. Maybe that goes to your karma if you break that rule.
So again, no guardrails. This was interesting. Lots of wood along the road, and I wondered what was going on. And they were repairing the roads. And these are all women, and they're heating the tar with wood. They chop it all up, and they heat the tar with wood, and they apply it probably with brooms, sort of. And they're women. So that's how they pave their roads. Pardon? The climate, as I said, depends on where you are on the mountain. It could be subtropical warm down, you know, in the 80 down below, and up top it might be in the 40s. It depends. So you have a jacket that you can shed as you go down. Again, here's another summit, and it's at 12,400 feet, which is pretty high. You know, if you go to Tibet, 17,000 feet. And I did ride a motorcycle to a base camp of Tibet, and I think it was more than 17,000 feet. But the air is very thin. He's got his jacket on. Another restaurant. And a great waterfall. Got a picture at the bottom. Again, be very careful. I took this picture that was down off the road. I have no idea what was going on, but I think these fellas were very interesting. Oh, again, I don't know what they were doing. A town meeting or something. And here was a local meat delivery. And we're entering a town at the top of the mountain. And there were people sitting around, and they were viewing a archery match. And look at the distance between the archer and the target. 460 feet. The length of a football field, including the two end zones, is 360 feet. So this is an extra 460 feet. And the people, the opposing team was standing very close to that. And I couldn't see the arrows. Once they shot the arrow, I couldn't see it. So they'd shoot, watch it go, and again, look at the people, they were standing nearby, and they're shooting at this little teeny weeny wooden target. And what's interesting, I read on Facebook that, not Facebook, somewhere, that AI, I use AI more than I do Google because it gives you it tells you. You go on Google and you get all kinds of different places you can go. You choose ChatGPT and it tells you the answer right then and there. So I said, they said, when I talked about Bhutan archery, they said that women were not allowed to touch the man's bow. It brought bad luck. And the archer, the man, was not allowed to sleep with a woman the night before the archery contest because it affected his ability to hit the target. I don't know. Look at how close they are. I mean, I couldn't even see the arrow. And it was wonderful. This wasn't a really big archery match because I understand they have cheerleaders. Each team has cheerleaders, but there were no cheerleaders here. But I understood they were mocking each other. Oh, lousy shot, you know, or they would compliment each other. It was very animated.
Did you ever try to shoot one of those bows?
No, I didn't. But I was an archer as a young kid. Bows looked very primitive. This was a development, and it had the most elaborate penis I could see on the trip. So that's the end of that, so Liz prepared you for it. And these are school kids, and again, they spoke English. They come up and ask me really good questions. Where are you from? You know, why are you here? Neat questions. And they wrote down all the answers. Beautiful view from the top. On to the next town. I was up top taking a picture of that. And at our first stop, Alan came up to me and said, I hear a noise in your motorcycle. And I didn't hear the noise. So we traveled a little bit further and the noise got louder. So he said, you've got a problem with your main bearing. And we were only to ride a half day that day, luckily, because they spent 4 hours pulling the motor out. That was their tools. No fancy toolbox, just a bag. But took the engine out, pulled the whole thing apart, and we drew a crowd. Look at this kid right here. It was a big entertainment for him. Look at it. And there was the problem. They heard that noise. They heard that noise in the main bearing of the motorcycle. They tore it apart in 4 hours and put it back together again, and they were very happy. So that was the driver. He's the guy that probably honchoed the whole thing. That was the mechanic. That's Alan. Bike ran beautifully after that. Okay, we said that it was a democratic, parliamentary type of government with a king. So there have been 5 kings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kings since the early 1900s. And this was the 5th king, and this is his son. The 5th king vacated he decided to vacate being a king at the age of 51 years, and he turned it over to his son. But here he is, there's his son. The king, polygamy is legal in Bhutan, so the king married 4 sisters. And each of the 4 sisters had their own palace. And he had his palace around the other side of the mountain. I read that he married 4 sisters because he didn't want any sibling rivalry. His son, who took over, I think it was, I don't know the year, is married to a commoner, and they have 3 kids. So he's the current king. One wife. Yep. And the current king, or the 5th king, I think, wrote this: "My wish for Bhutan in a few decades from now would be a civilized Bhutan with happier townspeople living in clean, mediocre cities, and joyful villages living in modernized and prosperous farmlands amidst the envelope of a pristine and tranquil natural environment of our mountainous dragon." And the big word here is happier. And so this 5th king did a lot for education. He really improved the education of the young people in Bhutan. And he also began measuring happiness. Every other year, he circulates a questionnaire with 33 questions about how happy you are. You know, how's your health? How do you like your job? That kind of thing. And so they don't measure gross national product. They measure gross national happiness. Bhutan, country in the world that we measure its success through gross national happiness instead of gross national product. The government cannot create happiness. For its people, there is no purpose for the government. You like that? Well, I had to look it up. I had to look up the happiest countries in the world on YouTube. What the heck? Oh, come on. Oh, there we go, 3 at once. There's the list of 225, and Bhutan is not listed. Yeah, I guess what? Finland is the top, Mexico is the bottom, but US isn't even listed. So I don't know. An accident. This was a great town. As soon as we got settled, I went for a walk. And again, a royal welcome. Look at the size of that mattress. I mean, so hard. And some of these, over in Thimphu, I actually took the bedding off of the other one and put it on top of me because it was so cold. Look at that. A young kid playing in the sand. They learn early. This one up here wanted me to take her home. And they spoke English, you know, they joked with me. This woman had a tattoo. Looks like the yak with rock. Her favorite musician, her favorite was Alan Jackson. And what I noticed here was the pictures of the king. I thought they're twins, aren't they? King. And I had one of these. It's so ratty, I didn't take it out. When you arrive, they put it on you. It welcomes you. This is my dinner. You know, there was no power in the hotel at dinner time. Some kind of soup. And this was nice. We visited a monastery. And they give you this. It's a blessing and a welcome to the monastery. And it's customary for a family to give one of their children, one of their young boys, to the church to become a monk. And he's called a novice monk. And typically maybe 5 years old. And you know, parents want the best for their kid. These might be parents some of those parents whose kid is not able to go to school because he lives in a far off farm somewhere. But in the monastery, they're fed well. You know, they're given a great education. They get respect as a novice monk. And they stay there until they're 20 years old. And then they have a choice to make, you know, whether they want to continue or leave. But can you imagine giving up your son? Okay, on to the last stop in Bhutan. I got up in the morning and I had a flat tire, and it was so easy because of the way this bullet was built. The back tire came out very easily. If you're a motorcyclist, you realize that back tires are really hard because the chain's all around them. Really hard to do. This one came off easily. They fixed it in no time. We continued. And we got gas, and they pump it from a jar. Lots of booze. And we entered a monastery, and those are small prayer wheels, and you spin them in a clockwise direction. Take off your shoes as you enter, and here they're building big ones. You can see it's their shop. And he pulled off, and this is the writing that circulates and flies off for you. Wish you a happy journey. Happy, happy. Beautiful spot for a view. We probably came along that road. Lunch. That road is really primitive. And here we are at the final hotel. My legs are up, enjoying an adult beverage, very dusty. Because I don't know the significance of that. And I left the hotel and walked out back, and they were repairing a wall, or building a wall, with women, a couple guys. She was cracking stones. She'd take big stones and make little stones. And then they would mix the stones and make cement, and they put them in these things. And they'd walk across and help build the wall.
Claude, what's the life expectancy?
Linda asked me what the life expectancy of a Bhutanese person was, so I looked it up. The average is 74. Women live typically to 76. Men live typically to 72.
How about the medical care? What kind of medical care?
I don't know what kind of medical care they have. Must be doctors and communities. I didn't see any hospitals. And so after the workday is done, and I was there at the end of the workday, they put on they cleaned up in the river, put on their saris, and everybody's smiling at the end of the workday. They worked hard all day long. They cleaned up and were smiling. I couldn't believe it. That was my dinner. And here was the crew and me. Final picture together and back into India through the antiseptic. I don't know whether this was the Bhutanese place or whether it was the Indian passport control. But again, no big deal. Back in India, our hotel, I remember my final meal was spaghetti. Oh, I was so happy. You know, I travel because I enjoy seeing how other people live. I'm very grateful and thankful to be able to travel. I hope in some small way I'm able to convince people that the Americans aren't too bad after all. And a tremendous sense of accomplishment after all those twisties and whatever. And so we got on that domestic airline, flew back to Delhi, flew back to JFK, we're home, and traveling makes you appreciate where we live and what we have. We're so fortunate, and I think we forget about it sometimes, but when you travel, it hits home. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Claude. What a fabulous trip. And I will say, I've obviously led a very sheltered life. When Linda told me we needed a warning about body parts, she didn't tell me that it was only many pictures of one body part. So I've had a whole education. Thank you for that. Anybody with any final questions for Claude?
Yes.
Do they have a choice of where they come back from karma? Do they want to be an ant or a yak or?
No choice.
No choice. But what would they like to be?
Well, it depends on your karma. You know, if you'd like to come back happy as a human, you have to have good karma. You have to be nonviolent, you have to be kind to other people and animals, and you'll come back happy.
And not drink on a Tuesday. And not drink on a Tuesday. Did I see another question?
Claude, was there something that really surprised you on that trip?
Something that really surprised me on the trip. Probably the penises.
We had a friend from Bangladesh, and he was adamant that you only used your left hand for one action, and you never ever shook hands with the left hand or touched people. It was always the right hand, that was the clean hand.
That's right.
The airport in Harrow is one of the most dangerous airports for pilots to fly into because it's down in a valley surrounded by mountains, and there are only certain pilots who are allowed to do it.
Wow.
And very often those flights are canceled. So you're good that you came in through India, you got there.
That's why we didn't do that. Well, the altitude, is thin, so it's probably hard to keep the plane up.
Hospitals, numbers, locations.
I never saw a hospital. I don't know the
one
answer
last
to that.
question.